Hello everyone, Stakuya here, and welcome back to the channel. I figured that we would do a little something different this time. I kind of want to do more informal content, talk over things, because there's going to be a lot of changes with stuff that's upcoming. I mean, hell, we got, Blood Alone, the DLC that's going to be coming out here soon for Hearts of Iron, and there's been a lot of talk about this DLC. Italy's getting a rework, baby, finally. But there's also a lot of changes that are going to be happening, something like that hasn't happened since the beginning of the game. I mean, we're talking about a game that is, it's 2022. It came out in 2016. It's 6 years. It's been 6 years since the game came out. And peace conferences are only just now getting updated. I mean, guys, look at this. Peace Conference Roundup. It's going to be very different now. We're actually going to have peace deals where you have your points mean something, where you're bidding and competing over provinces, versus, I just have enough points, so I'm going to take this. So let's dive into it. Let's look into this and see what it means. Because I want to do this with this, because I want to go over this dev diary, and I want to do more of this in the future when like Victoria 3 and others are coming out. I promise you all are going to see a lot more Victoria 3 content when that comes out. All right, here. Before we cover the new stuff, I want to address some changes to the jargon we introduced last time. The considering changing demands to bids to fit with the system. As the previous dev diary talked about, length with bids, we will now instead be referring to all of these as demands. Okay, so the way that it's basically going to work now is that you're going to have your limited amount of points, which, I mean, you can see right over here on any of these. Like, you can just see in small little letters, or rather numbers, we got all of our bid points. So it's the same kind of point system that we had before. But those points are instead going to be used to place bids on individual provinces, like what we had, except just because you bid on that province doesn't mean you're going to get it. Because when you bid on a province, that means that if other people also want to bid on the same province, the price of it is going to go up. I say province because I'm thinking this in like EU4 terms, but it's states. So you're going to bid on these states, and then the price of that will fluctuate based on the amount of people that want it. Which means some of these individual states that are going to be needed to form particular formables, or those that will need like high value resources, like in the case of tungsten or oil or other things that some powers may not have as much access to, those are going to be in really high demand. In fact, I'm wondering if from this system, that means you're going to get a situation where you have 3 major powers that are bidding over like control of a single state. But then what happens is you have a minor power that doesn't have as many points that puts bids on a bunch of other states that aren't really wanted, but because no one else bid on them immediately because they were prioritizing the high value states, that means that a small power all of a sudden takes everything. Ooh, that's going to need some serious testing when this comes out. And yes, okay, here we go. In addition to just taking provinces, that's what everything was before. You either took or state, or you puppeted a country, and then you gave things to that country. But that's really all that you could do. It was all about territory. That's the end-all, be-all of the game. Now, there's going to be 5 new type of demands added to the Peace Conference. 4 of these are a new type of additional demand, which we're going to go into. One of which is Take Navy. This will allow the participants in the conference to use the participation points to demand enemy capital ships as they would a single state. This means that players requesting the same ship will result in a contested claim. When the conference finishes, screen ships will be divided amongst those who claimed capital ships based on the ratio of capital ship industrial cost claimed. Okay, so if we see this, there's 4 capital ships that Germany has in the peace deal. And the peace deal is to take one of the 4 ships. Since we got 4 of these ships, each one will get 25% of screening ships. Okay, so if the UK and USA and France and the Soviet Union all claimed one of the capital ships, this means that 25% of the screening ships that worked with the capital ships would go to those respective allied powers. 25% to the Soviet Union, 25% to France, UK, USA, etc. They would just divide that. So technically speaking, if you didn't really care about the land, but you really wanted to claim some ships, you could focus a lot of your efforts on just claiming the resources and equipment from a state. that might be very valuable. Like if you don't have the manpower to really manage something. That's interesting to think about. Guys, that's going to completely change the game for how Germany operates. I mean, Germany's big thing is submarines. It's always been submarines. The strategy is to spam as many cheap submarines as you pretty much can. But a lot of this might do away with it, especially with how I think they're going to be reworking Navy. If after taking out France in 1939, you then managed to sneak a force over and attack Britain, and you knocked them out and actually ended the war on that side before you invaded the Soviet Union, that would mean that you could seize the entirety of Britain's navy. Because what you had to do before is you had to puppet the enemy state, and like you would take all of their states with the exception of like one singular state or province, and you would leave the former country there as just your puppet. That way you get access to their navy. But now you're going to actually be able to claim the entire navy, which means that Germany could use that for a launch on the United States, or attacking other places like going around Africa or through the Suez and go after India if they somehow break free. That's going to completely change things. Japan taking over the territory from China, if they manage to capitulate China and China has actually built up any semblance of a navy, that means they're going to be able to add their ships to their roster. That could be interesting. As mentioned previously, we now have additional demands, and these options require an underlying demand of puppet or change in government to have been applied to the state first. Okay, so you will have to actually do things to the country first in order to do other kinds of demands and effects below it. That makes sense. Secondary demands can be applied over the top of normal demands during the same turn or any subsequent turn. Good, so you don't have to waste a turn waiting on it. The first secondary demand we have is demilitarized zone. We can actually use demilitarized zones now. Oh, that's interesting. That's not necessarily as useful for single player, but I can imagine if you're looking for some role-playing elements for multiplayer and you have to engage in a peace and force someone to demilitarize a border, like if you're trying to organize in such a way that you were crafting a story, this is a pretty classic part of many historical peace conferences and serves as a way of keeping troops off the border. So could you demilitarize a border for something that you perhaps don't have the manpower or resources to actually control right now, and then later be able to attack them? Because if you got someone to demilitarize a border that had a lot of defenses, like let's say, I don't know why you would necessarily have to do this, but if you demilitarized the Maginot of France, that means that all of those forts that are built along it are useless. You're not going to have any troops on it. So if you can declare war and quickly seize it, you're going to seize the strongest defensive position. That's an interesting thought. The next two secondary demands are both economic, and those are resource rights and war reparations. To make resolving contested claims fit into our system, both of these demands target single states. Resource rights give access to the resources in a state, and war reparations gives control of local civilian factories in a state. Both of these last for a period of time, the length of which is still to be determined. Okay, so I can see, is there an ability for someone to essentially surrender over the course of war? In exchange, RP-wise, if you had someone who was willing to surrender in a conflict for specifically those things because they didn't want to actually fight in the war, and they surrendered their resource rights as well as war reparations for other states just to get a bigger power off their back, could that be possible? Would you be able to actually negotiate a peace much in the same way as you would in Europa Universalis or other games? That would be nice. But that is going to be interesting because what it means is you're going to have situations where the resources of a state might end up getting carved up and are more valuable for certain places than the actual territory itself. So what first level would need to be done before you can use that secondary demand? Because if you had a state that was completely independent, right, but all of its resource rights were carved up between different powers, would that be possible? Or does it have to be a puppet of one of the powers or something in order for that to happen in the first place? Or is just simply changing the government fine? Like that has to happen. But then if you have a democracy that is at war with the democracy, can they change the government, or does that have to puppet it first? I might be overthinking this. There's a lot of questions. And our final demand is dismantle military industry that removes military factories from targeted states. And our final new demand coming is dismantle military industry, which will remove military factories from a targeted state, and that can be used to tear down a heavy militarized state's military production and help slow down the remilitarization post-war. I'll be honest, guys, in single player, there's really no point in that. Now, again, a lot of these demands, everything that I'm seeing, I'm not seeing much reason to do so for single player, but multiplayer, this is opening up a whole world of different things that you can do for role-playing. What situation would remilitarization or demilitarization actually apply to? Because assuming that it's post-World War II, the Germany is divided between the Allies and the Soviets in, East Germany and West Germany and this kind of thing. You don't want to demilitarize it because you're going to be in a situation where something like the Soviet Union might declare on you, and then what happens? You're in a situation where your puppet or allies now have no military factories to be able to flush out their armies. You're not going to be able to do anything. The only situation which I can think that applies is with minor states that have rebel troubles or civil war issues. Okay, so if you're running into a situation where a state does not have the ability to produce any military equipment, and then they run into an issue where they have a coup or something happens, and that state, like Mexico, this happens a lot with Mexico, where the state gets taken over by the military junta or communist party, something happens, and immediately, of course, that state becomes hostile to the other powers around it, like the United States and others, and you don't want to deal with that on your border. So you could if you had to go to war with Mexico or some other kind of state like that, and you dismantled their military industry, this means that if they actually did go through a coup and then attacked you, they would have significantly less production to be able to do anything. In single player, again, that's not really going to be a thing that you're going to be able to do much with, but multiplayer, that is something. Well, guys, that's the end of this week's dev diary from the looks of it. I want to go into more of these. I could look at other dev diaries, and if you all want me to look at other games or analyze or talk about them for like Stellaris or for Victoria or for the other historical games, like different things that we're going to be looking at, I would love to do that. And I think that would make a great talking point about some of these things that we're going to be playing and doing together. So if you want to join Discord, if you want to play these games with me, if you want to have some fun, please make sure to click the link down in the description below. I want you to check out the comment section. Make sure to hit the bell button for notifications, anything you can to support this channel. I'm currently sick, but I have content that has to be made. There's a lot of things that have to be done, and I got a lot of projects to work on because we're saving up money to buy a house. So any help or support that you can give the channel is much appreciated. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Join us for the next one.